Hello everyone. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to spice up your prepper pantry with very little cost and very little hands-on time. I'm Rebecca from StockingMyPantry.com. Okay, so what I have here is a 70-ounce jug, that's 4 pounds, 6 ounces of great value picante sauce. Now my husband bought this the other day. He loves picante sauce and it was only $3 and something. Very, very inexpensive. That wasn't the sale price. That's just the normal price. And so he loves picante sauce and he thought that this would be great. I'm concerned though that he won't eat it all before it goes bad. Now I have had some people say you don't have to worry about salsa going bad because it has a lot of vinegar in it and all of that. And in theory that may be true, but I have had picante sauce go bad, grow some mold on it. And so I don't know where people get that idea. And you know, it is true, vinegar is a preservative, but I want to increase the shelf life of this and also make it shelf stable so that it doesn't have to be refrigerated. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dehydrate part of this jug of picante sauce. Okay, so I opened up the picante sauce and I don't know if you can tell, but it looks very watery up at the top. So I'm going to start off by shaking it, putting the lid back on and shaking it. And if when I open it again, it still looks watery, I'm going to pour it into a container, stir it up, and then dehydrate it. Okay, so I just shook it up. I'm going to take the lid off and we're going to see how it looks. And that does indeed look better. So I'm going to just pour it. Ooh, it's kind of messy. You know what? That is kind of slopping all over the place. So I am indeed going to actually go ahead and pour it into another container and then dish it onto the tray. Now, if I was working with a smaller jug of picante sauce, maybe this wouldn't have been a problem. But even me pouring this into the bowl, it was kind of slopping all over the place. So I think it's probably good that I am doing it this way. Now I don't want to overload these trays, so I am just kind of ladling some and making sure it's as level as possible. And then I'm using the ladle to spread it out on the trays. Okay, so I think it's better to do thinner amounts rather than really a lot thicker amounts. And so I only want to dehydrate about half of this because I know that my husband will be thinking, oh my gosh, why did you dehydrate some? But he'll be happy if we're out of salsa and he has some. So, you know, sometimes he just has to bear with me because I do stuff like this. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and I am going to do, I think I'm going to go ahead and do 4 trays of this and then I'll bring you back. Okay, so I now have 4 trays loaded up with the salsa. I've spread it out pretty well, not perfectly. You can see there's some little gaps, but I'm not going to sweat that. Let me just show you what I still have in the jug. I have maybe half of the jug. And I actually might see if I can pour what's left here into a quart-sized jar. In fact, let me just go ahead and do that now. Because if it almost takes all of it, I could potentially do one more tray. And actually, this is about perfect. Okay, so this is pretty full. There's just a teeny bit more in here. So I'm going to go ahead and pour what's still in here onto the tray. And that way I'll just have 1 quart jar that I need to put in the refrigerator. Okay, now hopefully this isn't going to overflow, but I think I've got enough space. And since I am using my Nesco, I have 2 dehydrators. I have a Nesco and I also have a Castore. And I just decided to use the Nesco today for this because I have more of the fruit leather trays for my Nesco. And with the Nesco, the tray that's on top dries faster because it's closer to the heat source and the fan and all of that. So this one's loaded up more, but it should dry a little bit faster. And so that's definitely a good thing. Okay, so I'm going to now just put the top on. And I will set this at 125 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 52 degrees Celsius, and plug it in. And I'll plan to come and check on it in around 8 hours. I may rotate the trays a couple of times if I am around and have an opportunity to do so. But for at least the first maybe 4 or 5 hours, I'm just going to let it go as is, especially since the top tray has so much more salsa on it. And I'm just going to go ahead and put a lid on this salsa and stick it in the fridge. So we have, instead of using this much space in the fridge, I'm just using this much space. And hopefully my husband will actually be pleased when we run out of this salsa and I have some dehydrated. Another thing is that I'm looking at it from the perspective of long-term food storage that's shelf-stable, that doesn't have to be refrigerated. So I think that this will work out well. And by the way, I didn't mention that at the end of this video, I will rehydrate the picante sauce and let you know how that goes. Okay, the salsa has been in the dehydrator for about 6 hours. And I don't know if you can tell, but it's still tacky. Now remember, this top layer was the salsa was very thick, but I'm going to show you the bottom layer, which I put very, very thinly, and you can see that it is dry. Now what I did is I started peeling it. It's dry enough that it can kind of just peel, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to at least attempt to peel this whole thing off. And obviously this one, especially since it's so thin, it's very fragile. So it's taken a little bit of doing, but it's not really stuck. It's just that this is so thin, it can tear easily. I'm actually thinking the thicker ones will do a little better. Now, and this is pretty tacky, this part right here. So maybe I need to let it go just a little bit more. I'll see. Actually, I think I am. But what I'm going to be doing is taking this layer off and then putting it directly on this rack where airflow can go through a lot better. But this part here is still pretty sticky. So I think I need to go ahead and let it continue drying. But this is the basic process, and I think it's going to work really, really well, because you can see how it does just peel off. And then you can put it on the rack so that the airflow goes through better. So anyway, I'm going to just keep dehydrating this for now. I will go ahead and get everything back on here and then turn the dehydrator back on. And then I'll bring you back for the next step. Okay, it's now been 12 hours, so let's go ahead and take a look. And I have not rotated the trays at all. This is the top one. And we'll see what it's like to try to peel. Okay. You can see that it's, for the most part, coming up real well, but there are a couple of sticky spots on it still. So I'm going to put that one aside. And I'm going to deal with each of these, but I did earlier peel off this, and you can see that this part is just kind of messed up. It's where it wasn't completely dry, and that's one reason why I want to let the other ones dry before I attempt to move them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift this off and slide it onto the mesh, and you can see that there's a couple of parts that have stuck on there that I'm not going to worry about. Okay, and so essentially it's actually nighttime now, and I'm going to be going to bed soon, so this will end up dehydrating much longer than it really needs to, but that won't hurt anything. And the point of removing it and putting it onto this is just to make sure that it dries all the way through. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but actually that feels dry, but there's probably a little bit of moisture still in this. So taking it off the fruit leather tray and just putting it on the mesh enables it to dry really well. And so anyway, but I don't want to mess with trying to pull these off while there's still some moist areas. So you can see, actually it's kind of interesting because the drier it is, the easier it peels. And so if there's parts that are kind of stuck, that's an indication that it's not completely dry. And so anyway, but you can see how simple it is to peel this up. And so once it's completely dry, then I'll put each of them just onto the regular rack and complete drying them. And then tomorrow I will show you the process of rehydrating it. Okay, so this is what the finished product looks like, and I want to show you. Let me actually pull the camera up a little bit so you can see a little better. This is the tray that was the thickest, and it is the only one that came out all in one piece. So some of the other ones left some bits on the screen. So I actually think going a little bit thicker is the way to go. So, you know, obviously the thicker it is, the longer it takes to dry, but this definitely dehydrated best. I mean, and it came off best. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to rehydrate it now. And I'm going to start off by, I'm only going to do about 1/4 of the leather. So I'm just going to cut this in 4ths. And the reason is because I have a ton of actual fresh salsa. So I don't really want a whole bunch more. I just want to rehydrate it just to see how it works. So I'm starting with about 1/4 of a leather. And I have here in this jar, I have 1/3 of a cup of really hot water. Might not be quite boiling, but it's very hot. And I'm just going to break the leather into the water, and I'm going to put the lid on so the heat will stay in. And that's how I'm going to rehydrate it. Actually, let me get a knife to push it down in there. Okay, I'm just pushing the salsa, or the dehydrated picante sauce, into the hot water. And I'm going to put the lid back on and just let it sit for a little bit to rehydrate. Okay, and I'll bring you back when it's done rehydrating. Okay, I only let it sit in the really hot water for about 2 minutes, but you can see it's pretty nicely rehydrated. I think there might still be a couple of bits, but there's also chilies in there. And so anyway, it looks like it rehydrated really well. I gave it a little taste, and it tastes like just like regular picante sauce, except for the fact that it's hot right now. So what you'd want to do is, after you rehydrate it, stick it in the refrigerator and let it chill, and I think it'd be real good. And what's really nice about this is that if you didn't eat picante sauce very often, or you didn't have refrigeration for whatever reason, power outage, or you're camping or what have you, this would be a great way to make, like in this case, just a single serving size of picante sauce. So I definitely recommend doing this. Again, you want the trays to be pretty thick. Put the salsa pretty thickly on the trays. And then I did about 1/3 of a cup of water for 1/4 of a fruit leather. If you were doing a whole tray of fruit leather at one time, you might want to try starting off with 1 cup of hot water and see if that's enough, because you could always add a little bit more if you want to thin it down a bit. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would really appreciate it if you would like the video, and if you haven't already done so, if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.